Let's start with the Michael Jordan of unsolved serial killers. In the late 1960s and early 70s, Northern California was basically a real-life horror film. The Zodiac Killer murdered at least 5 confirmed victims and was linked to 2 attempted murders, though he claimed 37 victims overall. His victims were couples parked in lovers' lanes, lone cab drivers, and random civilians. He attacked with guns, knives, and a chilling lack of pattern, which makes him a true multitasker. One night it was a .22 caliber pistol. The next, it was a knife to the back. Consistency clearly wasn't his thing unless you count the cryptic notes. He sent taunting letters and cryptograms to newspapers, basically LARPing as a villain with a flair for puzzles. He demanded front-page coverage, threatened school buses, and even gave himself his own cool-sounding villain name like a comic book reject. One of his 4 ciphers wasn't cracked until 2020, over 50 years later, and it still didn't reveal his identity, just more bragging about how he was having a great time and totally not worried about being caught. He signed his letters with a circle and cross, a logo as recognizable as Nike's swoosh, but a lot more stabby. People started spotting the symbol everywhere, from bathroom stalls to belt buckles, because nothing is more attractive than a serial killer brand. Despite thousands of suspects, including a guy whose basement probably smelled like guilt, law enforcement never found concrete evidence to charge anyone. One of the most talked about suspects, Arthur Lee Allen, had a resume full of red flags and weird behavior, but the DNA and handwriting didn't match. So, just like that, the case fizzled. He disappeared into thin air, leaving behind a trail of bodies, brain-busting puzzles, and enough conspiracy theories to power a decade of YouTube videos. The internet still debates his identity like it's a national sport. Ted Cruz memes, codebreaker subreddits, armchair sleuths who think they solved it with Google Translate. It's all fair game. Seriously, imagine being so evil and so smug that David Fincher makes a 2.5-hour movie about you, and you're still just out there, somewhere. Probably criticizing his portrayal on Letterboxd with a username like Zodiac4 Real 92. The Long Island serial killer. Ah, Long Island. Known for bagels, beach traffic, and apparently one of the creepiest serial killers of the 21st century. In 2010, police were searching for Shannon Gilbert, a SX worker who'd called 911, repeating that someone was chasing her. It took them over a year to find her body in the marshland, and even then her death was labeled accidental. Sure, because people casually run through swamps and die of coincidence all the time, but while searching for her, police stumbled on something else. 10 other victims dumped like discarded trash along Ocean Parkway, all within a few miles of each other. Most were women in their 20s who'd advertised services on Craigslist. Some were dismembered. Others were wrapped in burlap sacks because, apparently, this killer took packaging inspiration from a potato farm. The media quickly dubbed it the Gilgo Beach Murders. And the killer? He became the Long Island Serial Killer, or LISK. For over a decade, the case was an endless carousel of dead ends, suspicious cops, conspiracy theories, and internet sleuths doing their best CSI impersonations. Then in 2023, Rex Hoyerman jumped into the picture. He was a married architect from Massapequa, who had lived in the same house since childhood. It was very ordinary on the outside, but on the inside? There were burner phones, creepy search history, and a collection of disturbing online activity that basically screamed, "I'm not normal." He was charged with 3 of the murders, all from 2009 and 2010, and linked to a 4th. However, not all the bodies fit his timeline or his MO. Some of them date back years earlier. Some were male, some were toddlers. So yeah, there's a strong chance we're not talking about just one monster here. Maybe Rex was just one chapter in a much longer, darker book. What makes this one especially unnerving is the setting. These weren't backwoods disappearances. These were suburban neighborhoods with white picket fences. And somewhere in all that, someone was killing SX workers, wrapping them up like leftovers, and dumping them on the side of the highway for years. And somehow, no one noticed. Or worse, no one cared. The Monster of Florence. If Italy is known for romance, pasta, and scenic vineyards, the Monster of Florence said, "Nah, let's go full horror movie instead." From 1968 to 1985, this unknown killer, or killers, murdered 8 couples in the Tuscan countryside. Sounds scenic, right? Until you realize he was targeting lovers parked in cars, ambushing them with a gun, and then mutilating the female victims with chilling precision. But what really sends this case into what the actual hell territory is, how the investigation played out. Over the years, Italian police arrested dozens of suspects. Literally anyone who had a pulse and a mustache. They blamed farmers, voyeurs, a group of Satanists, and even a reclusive doctor who just happened to live nearby. One poor guy was accused, acquitted, reaccused, and then murdered. And while this circus of false leads and legal fumbles unfolded, the real killer just stopped. He vanished into the wine-soaked hills of Florence like a ghost. In doing that, he left behind a trail of trauma, a stack of botched trials, and one of the most incompetent investigations in modern criminal history. And here's the twist. This case inspired multiple books and a movie, and even drew thriller author Thomas Harris into the mess. Yes, the man who created Hannibal Lecter. When Harris visited Florence for research, the Italian cops thought he was part of the satanic cult, too. Naturally, it was a disaster. Jack the Ripper. Let's go back to 1888. London's East End wasn't exactly winning awards for safety, but then came a guy who made it worse. Jack the Ripper wasn't the first serial killer, but he was the first to initiate tantalizing fear and media frenzy. In just a few months, 5 women, Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were brutally murdered in Whitechapel, with escalating violence. They had their organs removed, throats slashed, and crime scenes that looked like horror movie sets. He taunted police and press with letters signed Jack the Ripper, some real, some fake, and at least one allegedly mailed with half a human kidney because handwritten threats just didn't have enough flair, apparently. The police were overwhelmed, and it was a Victorian tabloid fever dream. They interrogated hundreds of people, followed up on every shady character in London, and somehow still managed to catch no one. And despite hundreds of books, countless theories, documentaries, movies, and people on Reddit convinced it was their great-great-uncle Frank, Jack was never identified. His case remains the most famous cold case in history. Today, there's an actual Jack the Ripper museum, walking tours, and more theories than episodes of Unsolved Mysteries. The only thing more enduring than Jack's crime spree is our collective obsession with trying to solve it 140 years later. Bible John. Now, if Jack the Ripper was a Victorian horror show, Bible John was Scotland's 1960s equivalent, but with an extra layer of creepiness. Because not only did he murder 3 women, he also quoted the Bible while doing it like a killer with a theology degree and no chill. Between 1968 and 1969, 3 young women, Patricia Docker, Jemima MacDonald, and Helen Puddock, were murdered in Glasgow, all after nights out at the Barrowland Ballroom. The similarities were chilling. All were strangled with their own stockings, all had been menstruating at the time, and all were last seen with a well-dressed man who quoted scripture and talked about the immorality of dancing and drinking. Because apparently judgment wasn't just reserved for Sunday. The press dubbed him Bible John, and the nickname stuck like cheap cologne. He became an urban legend overnight. Women avoided the Barrowland. Glasgow went into full panic mode. Police interviewed thousands of people, artists sketched his face 100 different ways, and yet, he vanished. The case hit another level of weirdness decades later when people started asking, what if Bible John was actually Peter Tobin, a known Scottish serial killer who was active around the same time and also had a thing for killing women in grotesque ways? The timelines matched, the behavior was close, and Tobin definitely wasn't winning any human decency awards. But there was never enough solid proof to link them completely. And just like that, the trail went cold again. Bible John, whoever he was, faded into myth. A guy who danced, judged, quoted Corinthians, and left a city terrified for years. Somewhere between a sermon and a slasher film. If you ever needed proof that the scariest monsters are the ones who smile, dress well, and lecture you about sin, Bible John nailed it. The Servant Girl Annihilator. Before Jack the Ripper was busy terrifying London, someone else had already kicked off the nightmare genre right here in the US, in Austin, Texas, to be specific. In 1884, a shadowy figure began hacking people to death with an axe. And because 1800s, America didn't exactly believe in subtlety, newspapers dubbed him the Servant Girl Annihilator. Yep, straight out of a horror film and into the headlines. Over the course of a single year, 8 people were brutally murdered, including several black servant women and a couple of white women later on. The killer didn't just murder, he butchered, dragged bodies into yards, posed them, and sometimes inserted sharp objects post-mortem. It was grotesque, ritualistic, and totally unhinged. The attacks always happened at night. Victims were often bludgeoned in their sleep, and the killer moved silently through dark alleys and unlocked doors like he had a map or wings. It got so bad that citizens started organizing watch groups and sleeping with weapons. The city basically became an armed camp with gas lamps. The list of suspects was ridiculous. They arrested drifters, jealous boyfriends, random guys walking funny, even 17 people in one night, but no dice. The cops were working with 19th century tools and 19th century logic, so basically vibes and pitchforks, and then he just vanished like a ghost. The murders stopped as suddenly as they began. Now, here's where it gets spicy. Some believe the Servant Girl Annihilator later moved to London and became Jack the Ripper. It's a theory that crime historians love because it's just believable enough to make your skin crawl. The same type of victims, same insane level of violence, and it all fits the timeline, but no one really knows who he was, and no one will. The West Mesa Bone Collector. In 2009, a woman in Albuquerque was walking her dog on the dusty West Mesa when she noticed something strange poking out of the ground. It looked like a bone. Well, it was. And not just one. It was the start of a mass grave. What followed was straight out of a nightmare. Police eventually uncovered the remains of 11 women and one unborn baby, all buried across an isolated stretch of desert. Most victims were young Latina women, many of them Essex workers, and all had gone missing between 2003 and 2005. Their disappearances had largely been ignored until their bones refused to stay quiet. The killer was nicknamed the West Mesa Bone Collector, which sounds like something you'd read in a Stephen King book, except this was real. Whoever did this had clearly planned everything. The graves were neatly spaced, the bodies strategically hidden, and absolutely no physical evidence was left behind. Some fingers pointed at a former APD officer, others at a pimp tied to several victims, and some even whispered about snuff film rings. But with no hard proof, every lead hit a dead end. To make it worse, this case exposed how society treats marginalized women. Many of the victims were brushed off when they disappeared, written off because of their backgrounds. The killer knew that. He counted on it. And that's why he got away with it. Despite years of effort, tip hotlines, billboards, and even FBI involvement, no one has ever been arrested, not even a solid suspect. The desert just swallowed the truth whole, and the victims vanished into the sand, leaving behind one of the most haunting unsolved serial killer cases in modern American history. Which of these cold cases haunts you the most, and which one do you think we'll finally solve in our lifetime? Let us know in the comments below. If you want more twisted true crime stories that make you double-check your locks, hit that like and subscribe button and stick around. Thanks for watching.